I know that I always had kind of an impulse to make or be creative. I was always drawing. I was always dragging my families into plays and performances that I was doing in the backyard. Yeah, making things has always been something that has always been a language that I used. But I was also really good at school. I chose the kind of sensible line and was on the pre-med track for a while. But then I was always kind of secretly packing my course load with all of these art classes. And it was sometime in the middle of my third year in undergrad that I was sitting in some biochemistry class. My notes were filled with sketches and drawings. I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on in the course. So yeah, I applied for a really wonderful opportunity to spend about a month in the rainforest of Panama, and felt a bit like I was in disguise. It was like nobody knew that I wasn't an artist. They just started calling me an artist since I was in the residency, and gave me a studio and assumed I had a practice. And it was sort of this really wonderful. I spent my senior year working really closely with teachers in UNC's art department, especially Juan Logan, who is an incredible American artist. I was fortunate to work with Michael D. Harris, rest in peace. So yeah, there was some really I got placed with supportive people who saw that even though I had this kind of roundabout pathway, they were made when I was still based in South Africa. I worked figure-based, and I arrived in Johannesburg and suddenly had a bit of an identity crisis and as an artist, and felt really suspicious of my use of the figure, and kind of removed it completely from the work, and spent several years really kind of thinking about abstraction, thinking about grids, mathematical theories that are used to try to describe the structure of the earth, geology and other kind of earth sciences. I have been drawing, mountains and volcanoes for years. I think this kind of formation of these hard cliffs in the work signal a kind of primordiality that I'm interested in the work, as sort of like an origin point, or kind of an ancient sort of starting point of kind of crush and tension and eruption and formation. There is something really important about space and place and land and landscape in the stories that I'm telling in my work. And in many ways, landscape is kind of another character in the work. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time, as much as my work is maybe known for being figurative and narrative. And certainly, as you say, there's a lot of references to the places that I've actually been. I think by the time I was 18, we'd lived in Sri Lanka, Malawi, Sudan, Canada, the United States, like all sort of South Africa, so spending years here and there. And this kind of really rapidly changing visual impressions as a young person, to kind of be suddenly finding yourself in this new space, in this new culture, in this new climate. And so it kind of, all of those impressions get dragged into my practice when I'm thinking about space. So the image here comes out of some work that I did at a really wonderful residency in Texas called Art Pace, which I did in 2018, where I've been looking at all of these photography studio portraits. I had this idea to build my own kind of diorama of a photographer's studio. So built these kind of different levels of floors, and it's, pulled all of this kind of pretend replica furniture and painted my own backdrop, which, by the way, is kind of a take on Robert Duncan's Land of the Lotus Eaters, which is one of my favorite paintings. I quite love this sort of solidarity of this particular view amongst all of this kind of opulence and like lusciousness, deluxe velvet tufted gorgeousness around her, and this sort of aloneness. I love so much about drawing is its kind of provisional nature, that it's this thing on the way to being something else. And really, just like writing, it preserves so much in the process and in the struggle of making an image, that I love to let that show, to let that struggle and the history of how long it takes me or how many tries it takes me to get a particular image. I think allowing the drawing to sort of still be so visible in the work also offers this sort of opportunity to think about movement or the cinematic, or kind of a blur of movement, of gesture. So this piece Dynasty was commissioned by the Museum of Contemporary Art in Toronto. And yeah, I was just kind of offered this space in this museum that immediately made me think about opera house or a theater. And so I really kind of worked with that as a starting kind of compositional structure. And the feeling that I wanted was sort of sound and flash of movement when sort of birds take flight. This kind of splash or spray, so the birds and the foliage and this sort of piercing spears up into the sky, contrasted with this sort of really held together. And so that kind of flash of movement and then stillness, and then this kind of potential danger is what I think of when I look at the volcano. Sure. But when I look at these arranged boots, those kind of moving of troops through across landscape or through space. So the kind of shuffling of anticipatory action, like the boots together, the little dusty heels, kind of gathering that little momentum towards some kind of movement that could be dangerous, could be radical, could be revolutionary. It's not known, and it's sort of underneath the surface always. So the images, I think, come to mind. Like often, I don't do a lot of preparatory sketching. Like all the drawing happens on the surface. I do play with collage as a way of kind of understanding compositionally what I'm doing or what references I'm making. So any one image that kind of emerges in my mind will then come with like a folder of reference images. So it's then this landscape, and then, oh yeah, that shoe, and I need the dress from that other painting, and so there's this sort of process of gathering a bunch of references towards making an image. And then it always starts with drawing. And I'd say that's the process. It's quite intuitive, but again, as I say, really informed by a kind of rich archive of references that I've been kind of building over the years.